Alright. This is going to be a beginner's introduction to duck hunting. Basically what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible, is teach you everything you need to know about duck hunting without actually teaching you anything in particular. And by that I mean we're going to focus more on your mindset than stuff like equipment. And, you know, shoot this shotgun or use this decoy or this exact situation, do this. We're going to focus more on the holistic mindset of it all. And then we're going to focus also, we're going to look into like duck nature, like what ducks prefer, how ducks tend to act. So we're going to learn the duck and a general outlook rather than specific techniques and tactics. Okay, this is a basic structure, if you will, that you find a lot in like the, I don't know, the firearms training community. But basically, in this order, this is how things break down. And it is your mindset, then your tactics, then your skills, and then your equipment. If you can't shoot a shotgun, it doesn't matter if you have a single shot, break action, or the finest Parazzi, you know, it doesn't matter. And just like that, it doesn't matter if you're a great shot, but you set up in the wrong spot and you're not going to kill any ducks today because there isn't any ducks there to shoot. So it all builds like this, downward, not upwards. Buying fancy shit isn't going to necessarily kill you birds. Anyways, continuing on. Now, I'm going to break my own rule here a little bit. Pardon me, but there is a few things that you do need to get started. And this is if you're a complete beginner, this is you're just getting into duck hunting, there's only a few things you need. You don't need a lot of stuff. All you need is a shotgun, a license, some ammo, steel shot ammo, and then a friend or acquaintance. That is all you need. Say a family member, somebody that'll take you hunting. You don't need anything more than that to be a beginning duck hunter. Alright, moving on to mindset. Okay, this is a huge fundamental that nearly everybody misses in duck hunting, and even I find myself violating this #1 principle sometimes. And that is duck hunting is 60% your location. Okay? If you are in the right location, you don't need decoys, you don't need calls, you don't need anything. Okay? You don't need anything if you're in the perfect location. Okay, so it's 60% location. 20% your spread when it gets to that point. So now we have the good spot. Now we make it look natural, like the birds are using it. Okay? And then 15% camo, because if the birds see you, you know, if you spook the birds, birds are never going to come in. And then 5% calling, which is also something salesmen won't tell you. That most of the duck hunts I solo on, listen to me, if you go watch my videos, I'm not blowing a call. I blow a drake whistle, maybe, with my mouth. Not with the lanyard. Okay? Like if you are in the proper spot, you don't need any of this other bullshit. Let alone, like, the calling is effective 5% of the time, in my opinion. Okay? You know, there is those occasions when you call at them and it turns them around and they probably wouldn't have came if you wouldn't have called at them. But it is not a linchpin. You cannot take a duck call into the marsh and kill woods with it, or kill birds with it. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so continuing on with our location mindset, where we know location is the #1 priority, where if we're hunting in a bad spot, say we're not where the birds want to be, it's never going to be as good. You know, you're going to set up your beautiful spread in the wrong spot and then watch the birds land where they want to be. So being in the proper location is key. That is paramount. That is the #1 fundamental of your mindset. Okay, so now we know location is the goal. So how do we determine that location? That note here. I mean, and location doesn't necessarily mean, you know, I'm sitting over decoys. You can hunt ducks anywhere. You can hunt ducks, you know, where they roost, where they feed, where they're just passing through, where they're getting a drink, you know, where they're resting, or on, you know, it goes on and on. So anyways, how do we determine that location? Well, to get to that, we have to kind of look into what I call duck nature, which is how the ducks act, how they behave. We kind of have to become the duck. Like, we have to be able to estimate, predict what the ducks are going to do on a given day, given conditions, and estimate that and predict that as best we can so that we can set up there on the X, quote unquote, to hunt. Alright, so wind and duck nature. Now, everything that ducks are doing is going to be determined by what the wind is doing right that instant. If they're sitting somewhere and the wind changes 180 degrees, they're going to move within a matter of minutes, okay? So everything the ducks are doing every day is dependent on the wind. Okay, so now that we know that the duck's number one mindset priority is wind, let's get into duck nature. Alright, there's many kinds of ducks, all different sizes, all the way from like 12, 13 ounces up to like 3.5 pounds. Okay? And they all feed and behave and breed differently, but they're all kind of somewhat the same. They're all still ducks. Okay? There's puddlers and divers, you know, yada yada yada. Okay, well, what else do all these ducks do? What do all these ducks have in common? And that is that they migrate. And basically the migration is they are moving down south because it's too cold for them to find food where they are. If there's a foot of snow, you can't very well fly out there and get some corn for you to eat, or if it's frozen, you don't have anywhere to sit, so you fly south for the winter, right? And then you pair up and you fly back up north, breed, hatch some baby ducks, and you do it all over again. Okay, so anyways, migration is kind of determined by the size of the ducks sometimes. Like your bigger ducks typically migrate last because they're a little hardier, they can withstand the cold a little better. And also your feeding habits of your ducks is what is going to also affect their migration. Like I said, you know, stuff like teal, where they eat like a less corn diet, if you will. They eat like more aquatic bugs and stuff. Well, if it's frozen, they can't dabble to get their bugs and what have you. So they'll migrate. But then something like, say something like a goldeneye, which dives, you know, and they're really hardy, they won't migrate until like late winter. So it's all kind of determined by the duck and what the duck needs when it's going to migrate. But they're all migrating. They're ducks. Okay? Now, all ducks, regardless of breed, you know, species, whatever you want to say, fly, land, sit, eat, shit, rest, according to the wind that instant of that particular day of the migration and that particular day's hours, like whether it's twilight right in the morning, you know, or, you know, afternoon, midday. It's still determined by the wind. They're going to do different things in the morning, and they're going to do different things during the migration, but it's determined by the wind what they're going to be doing that instant. Okay? Now, weather also has an effect on the birds. Obviously, the wind is above the weather. The wind is the number one thing in the duck's mind. All this other shit comes second, and the wind's always there. Okay, anyways, the weather is going to have an effect on your birds also. It's also going to have an effect on your migration. Like I already said, if they can't find food because of a terrible blizzard, they're obviously going to move. So you'll get an increase in duck activity on those days. They'll be migrating through or migrating in. So say you're where the blizzard is, they're all going to be bunched up and looking to get out of there as quickly as possible. Well, if you're where they're migrating to, they're all going to be flying in there looking for a nice place to loaf and feed probably. Okay, so that's going to have an effect on the migration, the weather is. And it's also, say it doesn't cause them to migrate, they can still kind of get their food and they're not migrating, it's still going to have an effect on them. Okay, and this is on top of the wind, if you will, or the wind's on top of this. The wind is about the instantaneous duck locator, if you will. The weather is a broader picture, or a narrower picture. I'm not sure at this point, but anyways, okay. So on a sunny day, the ducks are obviously going to be able to see you better, but they're also going to be a little more free to move around. If it's a sunny, calm day, they're not going to have to find shelter. So say you have 100% of spots to sit. Okay, that's basically what's happening on a calm day. But then another day you have a ripping north wind at 20 miles an hour, and then you only have 10% of those places on that lake or marsh or stream or whatever. Well, with that ripping north wind, there's only 10% of those locations to sit on that stream, pond, or whatever that are protected and out of the wind. So that's how we use wind to narrow it down, if you will. Okay, but back to the weather. The sun. On sunny days, the birds tend to have more places to sit, and they can also see you better. Snow, the birds tend to usually bunch up, and maybe they don't want to go feed, so maybe they feed a lot before it's going to snow, and then they sit tight when it's snowing, and then after it all breaks they get back to their routine again. And then also rain, and rain is kind of like snow. They typically bunch up, but rain and wet snow also has another effect on birds to where physiologically birds have a double eyelid. An eyelid like ours, and then a clear eyelid, which is kind of like a windscreen or windshield in a car, if you will, to keep the rain out of their eyes when they're flying on rainy weather. Well, they can't see as well through that double eyelid. So you'll find them typically like closer, flying lower, and a lot dumber. You know, they can't see you as well, and they don't want to be flying. You know, it's cold, they want to land, etc., etc. So the double eyelids, that's just a physiological footnote, okay? But this is all duck nature, right? We're learning about ducks, how to be the duck, okay? So what matters to the duck all the time? Where's the wind? Because I want to be comfortable, right? Okay, and then I basically covered all that stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do now that we know that ducks kind of, you know, wind is paramount, what we're going to do is use what we know to develop strategies to hunt these birds. Okay, so we know, say with a west wind, that they're going to be sitting typically on the west bank of whatever body of water they're on, because that's where they're out of the wind. So instead of just taking a stab at, oh, we're going to hunt this pond, say it's a round pond, you're going to hunt, you know, if the wind's out of the west, you're going to hunt on the west side, the upwind side. Okay, so we're going to use what we know here to develop strategies. So now we're going to apply this philosophy to determining location in your real world scenario, if you will. Okay, what you're going to want to look for is a refuge. Like, it may be called a refuge, but I'm not talking about only hunt wildlife refuges. Anywhere where birds are resting comfortably in numbers is a refuge. Even if that's on public land, even if that's on huntable land, and they're sitting there, that is a refuge, quote unquote, for all intents and purposes of our discussion here. Okay, so there's going to be this ball of birds. Say there's 20,000 birds here. Well, those 20,000 birds are going to come into that area a certain way, and they're going to leave that area a certain way for migration, and then they're also, while they're resting there, they're going to need a place to eat and a place to loaf. Okay, so when you're scouting, that is the first thing you need if you're going to hunt ducks, is ducks to hunt. Okay, so determine where you can find a refuge. Okay, then figure out the nearest place to that refuge where those birds are sitting, if not the refuge itself, that you can hunt legally with permission. Okay, now, so to find these birds that we're going to hunt, and then we're going to apply all that shit we talked about earlier, we're going to do some scouting. Now, scouting is a pretty important aspect of hunting.